All right, so today we're moving on to Joshua chapter 10, and we're going to be reading a lot of awesome names, so hopefully you're all caught up on your Hebrew. This is going to be wild, as reading Hebrew names always is. People who have seen The Day There Stood Still that didn't star Keanu Reeves. Anybody? Just me, Steve. Oh, Chris. Come on, The Day There Stood Still? The original? Please tell me.
One of my
I've
favorites.
seen the one with Keanu Reeves.
Oh,
Yeah, yes, you qualify. You qualify. All right, anyway, that's kind of what that's from. But all right, so let's take a look. Joshua chapter 10, if you got your Bible, if not, look, you can look at the big gigantic computer on the wall. Now it came to pass, when Adonai-Zedek, king of Jerusalem, heard how Joshua had taken Ai and utterly destroyed it, as he had done to Jericho and its king, so he had done to Ai and its king. And now the inhabitants of Gibeon had made peace with Israel, and were among them, that they feared greatly, because Gibeon was a great city, like one of the royal cities, and because it was greater than Ai, and all its men were mighty. Therefore Zedek, king of Jerusalem, and Hoham, king of Hebron, and Piram, king of Jarmuth, Japhia, king of Lachish, and Debir, king of Eglon. Everybody good with it so far? All right. Any children's names coming out of that for you guys? Down the road? Anybody? Name your kid Eglon. He'll never go wrong. Anyway, said, "Come up to me and help me." Okay, so now you got the king of Jerusalem asking all these other kings for help. And he says that we may attack Gibeon, for it has made peace with Joshua and all the children of Israel. Therefore the 5 kings of the Amorites, the 5 that we listed, gathered together and went up, they and all their armies, and camped before Gibeon and made war against it. So last week we talked about how Israel was kind of tricked into joining forces and making a covenant with Gibeon. And so the idea of last week's sermon was to talk about how we as Christians sometimes we make an easy target because we feel like we have to be kind to people out of the goodness that Jesus taught everybody to do, even though people who read their Bibles realize that Jesus spoke truth, not necessarily kindness. One of the things that we tend to be very easy targets are people who want to maybe manipulate a situation or take advantage of us. So we talked about how in our lives we should be in prayer, we should be really using discernment, biblical discernment as to what to say yes to, what to say no to. We shouldn't enter into covenants too quickly. We definitely shouldn't enter into relationships too quickly. Whether it be a business relationship, a personal relationship, a marital relationship, whatever, we should do everything with discernment and thinking it through. And so now Gibeon has basically put itself in position to where it's being attacked. You guys understand, this is not Israel being attacked. Gibeon is being attacked because they joined forces with Israel. So now you have all the kings of the Amorites, which I know that for a lot of people, when you hear Jerusalem, you're going to get a little confused. It's that Jerusalem. But it wasn't always under their leadership. So now Jerusalem's come out to attack, and being the largest of the cities, has brought the other 4 groups of Amorites out to attack, and they're attacking Gibeon. So Gibeon now has sent word to Israel going, hey, maybe it's time that you jump in here, because we're in trouble. Okay? And so it's important that you understand these are the Amorite kings. So whenever you hear the term Amorite kings, it's the 5 kings who are attacking Gibeon throughout this story. And it says, "And the men of Gibeon sent to Joshua at the camp of Gilgal, saying, 'Do not forsake your servants.'" Remember the covenant was that you could be our servants, we would allow you in, we would protect you, we would extend relationship with you, we're going to take care of you. And so now it says, "Do not forsake your servants. Come up to us quickly, save us and help us, for all the kings of the Amorites who dwell in the mountains have gathered together against us." So now we have a situation with Israel's friends. The enemies are the Amorites. Israel's friends are Gibeon. So it really didn't take Gibeon very long to call in a favor. It's just been a few days. So now Gibeon's like, hey, remember that covenant you made with us last weekend? Remember that with the stale bread? For everybody's here last week, you remember the moldy bread? Yeah? That was the whole offering. They got a covenant out of moldy bread. That's a pretty good deal. And so now they're like, hey, remember our moldy bread that you ate? We're going to need some help. And so Israel really isn't in a position to attack, to do anything. But because of the covenant that they made with Gibeon, now Israel has to respond. And we talked last week at length about that idea of when you enter into covenant, sooner or later it's going to cause some kind of tension, some kind of friction. So you have to be careful who you enter into covenant with. So Israel entered into covenant with Gibeon, so now Israel is being forced, it's having its hand forced to go and attack and to care for Gibeon. Now there's 2 ways to view this, and both are correct in how we look at life. I heard somebody say this week, I'm not really here to give you the answers, I'm just here to get you thinking about the answers. And this is one of those situations where discernment matters. And we all have to practice it. The first way to look at it is when we let the wrong people into our ranks, it's just a matter of time before they will force us to change direction. When you let the wrong people into your life, when you make covenant with the wrong people, sooner or later they are going to force you to make a decision. Either to go the wrong way, or to go against what your beliefs are, or to change what you think, or whatever. When you let the wrong people in to covenant in your life, sooner or later they're going to force a directional decision. Now, leadership in the church, that's an easy example to use. When you let the wrong people into leadership, sooner or later they are going to pressure you to make a decision that goes against what you believe to be the mission of the church as a pastor. Now, in a relationship, if you enter into a relationship with the wrong person, sooner or later they are going to force you to go against something that matters to you. They are going to push you in a direction that is unhealthy, or they're going to ask of you something you're unwilling to give. In a business relationship with the wrong people, sooner or later they will force a decision. Now, there's also a positive way to look at this. When those we are charged with caring for need protection, we must stand at the ready. Israel made this decision. Israel saw a need, and now Israel is going to go care for that need. Now, Israel is doing what's right in the eyes of the Lord because they made that covenant, they're going to fulfill it. And we know that because God gives blessing to the situation. But we can look at it two ways. One, it can be destructive, or two, it can give us an opportunity for ministry. It can give us an opportunity to help. So that's basically what Gideon represents. And that's kind of like, most of that is really just a rehash last week for those of you who weren't here. So Joshua ascended from Gilgal. He and all the people of war with him, all the mighty men of valor. And the Lord said to Joshua, "Do not fear them, for I have delivered them into your hand. Not a man of them shall stand before you." Joshua therefore came upon them suddenly, having marched all night from Gilgal. So the Lord routed them before Israel, killed them with a great slaughter at Gibeon, chased them along the road that goes down to Beth-horon, and struck them down as far as Azekah and Medek. Pretty cool, huh? So after a long night of travel, after a long night of travel, they met at dawn, and Israel began to defeat them. So who's been up all night? Israelites have been up all night. They were not in position to defend Gibeon yet. They had not been in relationship with Gibeon long enough to be in position to defend Gibeon. But now they're forced to defend Gibeon, and they do what they committed themselves to do. And so they marched all night long. So, and that matters in just a few minutes, why I brought that point out. So as it happened, as they fled before Israel, they were on the descent of Beth-horon. And the Lord cast down large hailstones from heaven upon them as far as Azekah, and they died. There are more who died from the hailstones than the children of Israel killed with the sword. So how many of you guys have heard the story with the hailstones? Right? This is one of those ones where when you read it, you're like, how'd that one skip through Sunday school when I was a kid? The Lord cast down hailstones? That's awesome. Sorry, I was having some fun with hail jokes. Anyway, Amaranth Kings. No? So all I'm saying is, we did this. Alright, so it's interesting. So Israel had been marching all night long. And they begin this battle and begin to win. But right from fighting from the moment they arrived, but in the midst of the battle, God provided rest. It's harder to chase somebody than to be chased. Because when you're chasing, you're responding. And so in their mind, they're exhausted, right? So what does God do? God goes, just wait right here, I'll take care of them running away. He provides rest in the middle of a battle that began after an all-night march. For them to be able to stand there and say all they did was turn them around. So this is the defense of Gibeon. Now this battle in Joshua 10 goes a long ways. But right up to this point, they've been marching and going to defend a city that really they shouldn't have been made covenant with to begin with. Okay, and I told you last week, this comes back to bite them rather quickly, and here we are. But what mankind could view as an impossible and difficult situation, God turns into an overwhelming positive for Israel. And so in the middle of the battle, God brings deliverance from the craziest place. Hail? Really? But really, that's the story of the entire wilderness journey, isn't it? And when we go back, we look at trees being thrown in water to make the water sweet. We look at different deliverances. We see bread on the ground, quail flying in from nowhere. We see all these things, water from a rock. God continues to astound where mankind's imagination leaves off. In the tent of the Israelites, when they were talking about this possible victory at Gibeon on the way there, do you think at some point they were like, it'd be awesome, hailstones? No. I'm pretty sure none of them thought hailstones. Right? I'm pretty sure none of them thought manna. Or throw a tree in the water. Or part a Red Sea, stop a river. But consistently, God shows them that He provides deliverance from places that mankind would never in his wildest imagination create. This is not the place Israel would have laid its trust. In hail? But that's where God delivers them. Consistently, historically, you see the deliverances of God even in contemporary world from places that people go, I had no idea. How many times have you heard that testimony? God provided from where? But He does. We think in terms of provision we can create, right? We think in terms of the church wants to do more, the church has to raise more money, therefore the church needs more people. Right? That's how we think. If we want to have a big outreach to downtown Riverbank, we think in terms of, well, we can't do it with 3, we've got to do it with 400, so we've got to get more people. Our answers always come in what makes perfect sense to us. Except that when you look at what God does consistently throughout the Bible, and what Jesus does throughout the New Testament, it's a consistent deliverance from places that mankind wouldn't put a stop. No one thought of hailstones. And certainly no one thought of what happens next. So then Joshua, now it's very important that you read this part very carefully. Then Joshua spoke to the Lord in the day when the Lord delivered up the Amorites before the children of Israel, and he said in the sight of Israel. So what's he saying? In the sight of Israel, he's speaking to God. There's a word there that's not there. And that's asking. Right? Sun stands still over Gibeon, moon in the valley of Ajon. So the sun stood still, the moon stopped, till the people had revenge upon their enemies. It doesn't say, please, if you wouldn't mind, we'd appreciate it if. It'd be a really cool idea when. Joshua speaks directly to God, and that's why verses 13b and 14 are so important. It says it's not written in the book of Jasher. So the sun stood still in the midst of heaven, and did not hasten to go down for about a whole day. And there has been no day like that before or after it. And the Lord heeded the voice of a man, for the Lord fought for Israel. The Lord heeded the voice of who? A man. He was not asked. You guys understand, there's a very different strong terminology between what Joshua does here and what Moses does. Moses pleads with the Lord constantly, right? Kill them, right? That was when Moses is pleased, right? Just take them away. Then he pleads with God to save them. Moses pleads with the Lord. Joshua says, sun, stand still. Right? It's a very different way to talk to God. And that's why the Bible is very careful to record, that was the one time. Right? So the name it and claim it corporations can step back for just a second. You guys know what name it and claim it? You don't know? Congratulations. Joshua needed more time and saw a chance to inflict major damage against their opposition in the Promised Land. So now we're entering into the strategy, right? We're entering into the methodology. And God caused the earth to stand still so Joshua could finish the work. So God says, all right, I hear you. Everything stands still for just a second. And everything does. And so now Joshua's entering into the most fierce battle Israel has ever faced. All right? And I say that, and it's true. If you read the Bible, this is the fiercest battle Israel ever faced. They are fighting so many people at one time now. They are fighting the 5 kings of the Amorites, which means they're fighting the 5 nations of the Amorites. And then as you read on, you read all the different cities they fight in the midst of fighting the 5 nations. So now they're going through this huge battle, and God allows the sun to stand still on this one day to defeat those 5 before he moves on to the other 7. And so you see this massive battle going on. And with the darkness coming in the hottest part of the battle, God provided light. So when things were at their most fierce, when things were at their most decisive, God provides them with just enough light for just enough time to accomplish what was necessary in the middle of what the most contested part of Israel's move into the Promised Land. So Joshua told the moon to stand still. Joshua told the sun to stand still. Joshua didn't ask. And one of the great theologians I read said that Joshua acted on this occasion by impulse on his mind from the Spirit of God. Joshua was so in tune with God that he didn't need to. He knew that this was what was going on. And he stood up with all the authority. Now, that's a big deal, because where does it say that Joshua spoke these words? In front of the nation of Israel. It does not say that Joshua said this in his prayer closet. It doesn't say that Joshua mumbled under his breath while talking to a few elders. He stood up in front of everyone and said, "Sun, stand still." That's kind of a big one. There's no, there's no vagueness to that, right? Children of Israel couldn't go, well, what he meant was, metaphorically, that the sun would stand still. He's talking about Jesus. There's nothing vague here. A lot of times in Christendom, we vague things away, right? We're like, well, Pastor, well, in my prayer, what I meant was that metaphorically Jesus would be. This is a statement, a bold pronouncement in front of a rather large group of battle-worn people. Because guess what he did? He stood up and said, "Hey, we're winning. Let's keep fighting." These men have been marching all night. They've been fighting. Joshua goes, "We're going to get to fight at least one more day with no darkness." And he makes this pronouncement. And everything is as Joshua tells him to. So Joshua then tracks down, we're going to paraphrase right up until close to the end. Joshua tracks down the kings of the Amorites, destroyed them over the next few days, along with the other 7 cities. So, 7 other cities. Now, I'm going to include this because I'm going to make an assumption that many of you spend time on Facebook, and I don't know that that's true. But there's been a thing that goes around a lot about how NASA proved that this is a true story. You guys ever heard that? Okay, if not, then I'll just skip over it because I was going to talk about it. No? Okay, fantastic. Good, don't read it. It's not true. All right. See, it's not true. But what's interesting is there's many other ancient cultures that record a longer day than normal for no apparent reason. They have as many as 4 other cultures that record a day right around the same amount of time in which the sun stood still for a long time. And they don't have an explanation for it. Now, NASA has never proven, nor did NASA ever care, to use the Bible to go, "Oh, look, we have a longer day. I think we would shoot the rocket." We know. There was a letter going around for years. And Christians would cite that stuff. See, science is proving, okay, it's not true. NASA never bothered. But it's important that we understand the truth. You understand what I'm saying? That's why I brought that up, in case anybody has this, because this story has generated that letter going around on the internet for years, and we all know the internet being the source of all truth. You have to be somewhat careful occasionally, because there's like 3 guys out there trying to deceive on the internet, and it's hard to tell where they're at. Okay? Anyway, at the end of it, in verse 42, it says, "And all these kings and their land Joshua took at one time, because the Lord God of Israel fought for Israel." So now you have this massive victory over a period of just a couple of days, right? Long day. Very, very long, sunshiny day. And so all these battles take place. And Joshua slowly works his way through each city. And if you go home, and I encourage you, go home and read all the verses. I didn't want to put them on the screen because it's just a lot of city names and slow, methodology. But Joshua moves from one city to the next. Slowly but surely. He does not take everybody and have them go attack all at one time. He moves from one city to the next, to the next, to the next. And he doesn't try to fight the whole war in one move. He just moves slowly and defeats what he can as he goes along. And in this day, he ends up taking more territory than at any other point in time. So in the face of impending doom, God's presence on their side allowed them to make it their greatest victory. The reality is they are facing their greatest physical opponent at this point. Because if you remember with Egypt, they didn't fight. God delivered them. But in this case, they are fighting their greatest physical opponent. There are thousands upon thousands upon thousands of soldiers running from all over the place. And now they've united, right? Up to this point, it was fight Jericho, fight Ai. But now all of a sudden, all these other kings have united in opposition against Israel, and they're closing in. So God delivers out of this point of very ugly, hot, contested, difficult battle, delivers Israel through the use of hailstones and light and energy and all these different things, he delivers them the promised land. He gives them what he promised, but they have to be on the front lines fighting the entire time. And so Joshua slowly and methodically moves through everything. And so as we learn from this, we can understand that God provided as they found need in their mission. If you look at what they needed a little bit of rest, right? They needed God to just go ahead and wipe out a few thousand. It was very helpful at that point that they didn't have to run down the hill and chase them. Because what happens when you run down the hill and chase somebody? You have to come back up the hill sooner or later. It's a lot of work, right? And the reality is the quickest way to break ranks is to run after someone. Remember, Joshua pulled that on Ai. Remember, we walked up, knocked on the door, the doorbell ditch, took off, and they chased him? Well, that's what happened. And so the last thing you want is your soldiers running after people. You want them to stay in their ranks. And so the reality is God takes care of that. He provided hail for rest and recovery, provided light for the continued battle. He allowed the sun to stand still to provide the light necessary for Joshua to continue in this fight, because they had a chance. See, it's one thing to look at this from a negative. The negative would be this. If you're the children of Israel and you're like, how many people are attacking Gibeon? 5 different nations are attacking Gibeon? To the human being, it could be, man, that is a huge amount of people to try to fight. We're not ready. We don't have what we need. You know, our soldiers, in order to get there to fight, we're going to march all night. I mean, it's easy to look at all the negatives. You know, we're going to march all night, which means we only have a few days to fight, and we're going to be exhausted. And the reality is they're ready. They've been camped. They're set up. The positive way to look at it is to go, all of our enemies are in a pile. They're no longer spread out. All 5 nations are right there. We don't have to go to their cities. They're right there. How nice is that? They got in a line for us. It's like the Revolutionary War all over again. Right? Thank you for standing in line. You know? And I have plenty of British friends, and I make that joke with them all the time. The reality is that we can look at it from the positive. See, God's people look at it from the positive. We go, well, God's delivered them into our hands because they're all standing right there. From the human side, we look at it and we go, gosh, that is a huge enemy. There's a lot of guys there. And, you know, the reality is they've decided to fight together. Their common energy is they hate us. Right? You guys ever been in a situation where you just feel like everybody hates you? Because you got 2 or 3 people running around and stirring up the junk about you at work or at school or whatever, and you feel like, gosh, I'm all by myself. Well, that's how Israel could have felt, except Israel had God. Right? And Israel's like, well, the nice thing is they're all right there. So if we go there, we can deal with the problem. And so God provided as they found need in their mission. It's important that we understand that as they found need in their mission, He provided. He didn't say, Joshua, don't worry. I got a hell of a plan. You guys are like rough. That's it. Like 95 out of 10. Nothing's funny when it's hot like that. But the reality is, He didn't say that to Joshua. He didn't say, don't worry, Joshua, whatever you ask. If you want the earth to stand still, and you want the moon not to move, and you want the sun to keep shining, I'll do it. He doesn't. He just says, I'll take care of it. You go do it, I'll take care of it. And I think at some point that promise has to return to be enough for us. The reality is we have to learn that promise has to be enough for us as Christians. That if God says, I need you to go take care of it, why don't we trust Him to give us, to fulfill the needs of our mission? But a lot of the times we want to make sure we have everything ready before we move. We want to make sure that we're all good and comfortable before we act. And the reality is God's saying, listen, I put the mission in front of you. I will provide as you find need on your mission. But a lot of times we sit there and we say, no, God, what we like to do is have everything organized before we leave. Except that you got to remember, for Israel, because of the way they lived their life, they were kind of used to this part, right? God said, leave Egypt. How? Trust me. Right? I'm going to take the one guy you have that can't talk well, and I'm going to have him go talk to Pharaoh. But from day one, that was God's plan for Israel. They're kind of used to this part. Because they've lived that life on mission. They understand their whole life has been a journey. Because you got to remember, all the other old generations all died off at this point. So this group, their entire life has been on this journey. They're used to God providing. Those of us now, when we look at it, we're used to us providing. We're used to us rounding up the resources. We're used to us putting the battle plan together. We're used to us picking the mission. Israel, because of the way they lived their lives, they were used to God providing. So, keep in mind, they're still human beings. They make a ton of mistakes, which we enjoy laughing at occasionally. But the reality is learning that in the midst of the battle is when God does His greatest provision. And God consistently provided for them in the midst of missional crisis. Now, going back to manna and quail and water, that was missional crisis, right? The mission was to get to and overtake the promised land, for God to provide. Well, guess what? Food and water is a crisis. If you don't have either, you're in crisis, right? If you don't have food or water, you are in crisis. You're hungry, you're thirsty, and tomorrow's not looking good. So that was in the midst of crisis. Then you look at the various miracles in the midst of battles all throughout their journey. And for us, looking forward for us, if we want to see God provide for our mission, we must first set out to accomplish it, even if circumstances seem imposed and impossible. The reality is we have to learn to live our lives on mission. We have to learn to live our lives on target. And accept the fact that sometimes we're going to march all night. But trust in the midst of those dark, dark times that that's when God provides the greatest. I think one of the worst things we ever did was come up with this idea of short-term missions trips. Because we get people thinking that you have to leave to be on mission. But you don't. We call them missionaries, right? Because they go to a foreign country. But the reality is all of us serving the kingdom are missionaries because we're citizens of heaven now first, right? So therefore, any of us, whether living in America or living in Riverbank or Modesto or Turlock or Sirius or wherever we live, the reality is we're on mission. We are missionaries because we are citizens of heaven first. And so we have to set out to accomplish it if we want to see God provide for our mission. But a lot, like I said, we're very comfortable with waiting. One of the things I put in here, just mostly for my own sake, is that we can't question the manner of provision. But see, a lot of times I hear people say, well, you look at hail and you're like, hail's cool, but lightning would have been better. Right? Wouldn't it? Really, it would have been. Fire would be sick. Yeah. Right? Seriously, not only that, it would have paved the road, done all kinds of things all at one time. But that's what we do. I mean, Christians, we do it all the time. Well, how much do you need? Well, we probably need like 100. And you only get 100. And you're like, well, 1,000 would have been better. God's like, you needed 100. You need 1,000. And a lot of times we come up with this idea that God's provision has to match our view of what's great provision. But if you look at this journey, and like I said, really, this is we've kind of come to the end of how we're going to view this for us. Is that when you look at it consistently, God provides in the craziest way, over and over and over and over again. And it still goes on today. When you hear about churches having miraculous, opportunities in ministries that just sort of change everything. It's like, where did that start? Well, believe it or not, isn't that how it always starts? And you're like, it never starts with, well, we had a staff meeting. And the Lord moved. Hallelujah. No, it's always just like some dude walking off the street, changed everything. Right? Because the reality is that God provides how He chooses to provide. And if He decides to wipe people out with hailstones, that's His call. For a lot of us, we're like, man, it just seems like it'd be a much quicker way of doing it. But for God, He's saying, listen, don't question the manner in which I provided. Accept my provision. Enjoy my provision. If my provision doesn't match what provision is in your head, I don't care. And we have to accept that. Instead, we commonly look in the face of God's provision and we go, I don't think it's God. Because He wouldn't do it that way. Why? The God who had Moses throw a tree in the water to make it sweet? That God. He wouldn't do something crazy, go off the wall, maybe it doesn't make sense. That God? You know what I'm saying? But we do that, don't we? That's not God's provision. God's provision is fantastic and easy. Really? Somebody had to carry the water. But we do that. And we have to step back. And like I said, I put that one in there for And I think we've got to learn to think in terms of battles before we win the war. And, the reality is, when you look at what Joshua does in Joshua chapter 10, is he deals with small victories first. It wasn't much to overcome Lachish. It took 2 verses. I don't know what that means, as far as battle terms, but 2 verses is a pretty small amount of the Bible dedicated to a battle, right? But the reality is, a couple verses, Lachish is gone. A couple verses, Jeroboam's gone. But he takes, and he just sort of methodically attacks the promised land to achieve ultimately what the mission was. And, when I think in terms of this and how this applies to us, is kind of this attitude that do today what I can do today to enable me to do tomorrow what I can't do today. And I think sometimes when we look at the war, we really want to win it, right? Doesn't everybody want to win it? When you say, gosh, I just want to see Riverbank saved for Jesus, doesn't everybody go, yes, but in the back of your mind, you're like, how in the heck are we going to do that? Right? There's no way. We are 50 people-ish. We can't pull that off. We can't do that. We can't change community. We can't change people's lives. We can't do all of that. That's just too much. We don't have the resources. We don't have the manpower. We don't have a good enough speaker. We don't have a good enough worship team. We don't have a good enough small groups program. We don't have all these different things. We don't have it. We can't do it. But when we start to think in terms of the small battles, when we start to think in terms of what our community needs, and I look at the table in the back with the backpacks on it, there is no reason that every one of us in this room shouldn't buy it. There's just not. This morning, I spent like $3.50 on Altoids. I bought coffee and a breakfast sandwich at Starbucks. That puts me like $37. I have a backpack. You know what I'm saying? But those are needs, Altoids and Starbucks, because I have to talk to you close sometimes when we're in here. So I'm sure you all appreciate the Altoids. But the reality is I have spent that money on meaningless things. And I look at something like that and I'm thinking there are kids who are going to go to school this fall, young people who are going to go to school this fall, without anything that's going to help them be successful in the classroom. But this is an easy, simple little battle our church can win. And begin showing the community we care. Instead of looking at the whole thing and going, we can't do it, start thinking like Joshua did in chapter 10, and start thinking, okay, but we can go take Lachish right? Let's not fight Lachish and Jericho at the same time. Let's fight Lachish first. Well, those are simple things. When we think in terms of that, when we think in terms of doing service-oriented activities, and as a church, we have to start looking at our community in a systematic type mentality, which is how can we get involved over and over again in various different things that we can accomplish, that we can do, and just trust that God's going to provide as we get more and more involved in the things that we need. Joshua didn't need hailstones to defeat Lachish, right? He didn't. There were no hailstones there. But what he did need was hailstones when they needed rest. What he did need was light when the darkness was coming. So instead of stepping back and saying, God, provide light and hailstones and smite Riverbank for Jesus, we say, let's go out there and let's start providing for the needs of the community. And when we need hailstones, God will bring. You know what I'm saying? But instead, we like to hailstones first, right? Shop it on. Shop it on, and then we'll clean it up, baby. Right? We would prefer that, let's be honest. Come on. Everyone in your head, you would prefer it. But the reality is we have to look in terms of this kind of mentality and trust God when we need miracles, trust God when we need provision, trust God when we need the bigger things. And just say, okay, God, you know what? You're going to provide when we need it. You're going to bring those things when we need it. You're going to do those things when we need it. But as we go along, we can do these things. We can do a community Thanksgiving dinner without any problem at all. This church cooks awesome. Right? We do. Seriously, admit it. It's not arrogant, kind of. But it's true, right? That's one thing we do really, really well, right? We cook. Some of us eat well, but most of us cook really, really well. And it's like, why in the world is that not a community event? It should be. Shame on me for not making it a community event. Except that that's a little battle. And then we just say, God, we just need you to keep, you're in front of us. We're going to trust you that you're going to give us chance to win the city for Jesus. You're going to trust us. We're going to trust that you're going to give us the chance to win Northeast Modesto and Oakdale for Jesus. And we're going to trust that you're going to provide for us facility needs, financial needs, concerns, all those things. If we become attached to reaching the lost, and every one of our battles is aimed at reaching the lost, we can do that. But if we become focused only on God fighting everything for us and us just getting to sit here and chill and enjoy it, it ain't going to happen. We have to move and let God provide in the midst of our mission. Because He does that really regularly for the Israelites. You know what I'm saying? Now, like I said, I think the backpacks are great. I've been thinking about them all week. Why not have me done that every year? I don't know. You can blame me for that. But the reality is we should be doing it. And we should have, all this stuff going on. That's what we do. You can take that home and be better. Let's pray. Father God, we just thank you so much for this morning. And Father, I thank you for our band. I thank you for their willingness to work hard and practice and really desire to please you with everything they do. I thank you for all the leaders in this church, those in finance, those in the elders, those running the various ministries. And I thank you for every person you brought in here, whether you today or age-old veterans. And God, I just pray we just we quit worrying about the whole war. We just start looking for battles to fight, and let us methodically work our way through those who are in need in the city and reach out to them in love as we reach and meet their needs, instead of just telling them what they need and providing for what in fact they do at this very moment. So Father, I pray we become a church that understands the mission, that understands who you are, that becomes just engrossed in your mission, and we not lose sight of that. In the tremendous name of your Son, Jesus. Amen. All right, you guys are dismissed. Please talk about service.